Hey friends, I'm glad you're here. I'm Gio, and Bentley's with me. Let's go on a Caribbean cruise together. Last call for boarding, the text said. I rushed toward the gangplank, connecting dry land to the ship, suitcase rolling alongside me. My flight from the Bahamas had been delayed by a little wind. They called it hurricane season. I called it a lazy pilot. The sky looked clear to me. Just before I stepped aboard the ship, a deckhand waited. He scanned my ticket, checked my ID, and said, "Welcome aboard, Mr. Dominic Gold. Your room is on level 4. Follow the corridor to the elevator, punch in 4, and your room is about 5 doors down." The ship smelled of lemon cleaner and new carpet. People bustled about, searching for rooms or elevators or trying to find their way to the main deck. The boat looked big on the outside, but on the inside, it was a maze of off-white corridors, bronze handrails, and a midnight blue carpet speckled with stars. Hardwood panels lined some walls, looking more like a fine hotel than a boat. Indirect warm lighting calmly lit each space, making the narrow corridors cozy instead of claustrophobic. I found the elevator, waited a moment, then entered. Mirrored ceiling, bronze railings, and a panel listing each deck, 15 in total. The ventilation hummed, a noise I would get used to and ignore for the rest of the trip. Though I was on water, I didn't feel it, maybe because we hadn't started moving, or maybe because the ship was so massive. A plaque on the back of the wall said, "Dawn's Light, gross tonnage, 180,000. Length, 1,100 feet. Beam, 130 feet. Commissioned, 2017. Built by Meyer Turku in Finland. Maximum passengers, 6,500. Crew, 2,000. Another sign announced, "Cell phones will not work a mile from any shore. Plan accordingly." My love life went the way of the dinosaurs. Extinct. No matter what I try, guys don't want to go out with me. At least lately. Just last week, I asked a waiter if he wanted to spend some time together. He had the gall to tell me no. He preferred dating some traveling photographer over me. The week before that, I was looking for a no-commitment hookup at a bar. I tried 5 times. All said no. One guy's date almost beat me up. In my defense, the guy looked single to me. I'm in Miami, aboard the Dawn's Light, a luxury cruise for those of us who belong to the LGBTQ. It will be a 10-day-long pride parade with an infinite amount of hookup options, amidst the best food you could eat. Not to mention drinks. No need to worry about a designated driver. Think about it. No kids either. The elevator arrived at deck 4. The hallway looked identical to the other, except it also had a restaurant near one end, something called the Aquamarine. Tacky. I didn't plan to spend much time below decks. My cabin held 2 twin beds, a flat screen on the wall opposite them, and a couple of recliners facing the large window, which currently framed the Miami skyline. A desk sat beside it. There was barely enough room to walk between the beds, let alone around the room. A small bathroom and an even smaller closet finished off the cabin. I checked out the closet, 5 shirts, 2 pairs of pants, 3 pairs of shoes, and, shades of John Travolta, a white suit. Yep. One of his shirts was also light blue. Somebody lived here already. On the little shelf above the clothes lay a wallet, a set of keys, and a gold ring. The bathroom door opened. A skinny man wearing a towel emerged, hair wet and spiky, brown with copper highlights. It looked freshly styled. I wasn't the only man looking for a little action. But not with him. He's too skinny. God, he said. The humidity here is intense. I feel like I need another shower, and I just had one. Been here long? I asked. About an hour. You must be the roommate, he replied, pulling some clothes from the closet. They said since my partner and I broke up, and I was solo, and I wanted to save some money, I had to share a room. Hope you don't mind. I adopted the bed closest to the window and the left side of the closet. I'm left-handed, so it makes it easier. Nice to meet you, I nodded diplomatically, setting my suitcase on the other bed. I knew there was a possibility of having a roommate, but hadn't thought it would happen. Alvin Toodles, he replied. I'm from Rhode Island, a little town outside Providence. Humidity doesn't exist, but here it's a law of nature. You? Dominic Gold, I replied. Oregon. I flew in from the Bahamas this morning. Seriously? You know how to travel. I placed my tux in the closet, added a couple of shirts. Not everything would fit. Is this the only closet? I asked, looking for a place to put my shoes. Alvin shrugged. We're on a cruise ship. Space is limited, so be grateful for what there is. I slowly inhaled. Like it or not, more than half my things would not fit. I'd be living out of my suitcase. Alvin had changed into shorts and a black Jurassic Park t-shirt, slipped on sandals, and waved. I'm going shopping. Wish my credit card luck. Don't forget your wallet, I said, pointing back to the closet. He grabbed it and the keys, but left his ring. My phone buzzed with a text. Voyage update. Welcome aboard the Dawn's Light. Just a reminder, all laundry must be left with your room attendant by 1 o'clock to be ready for same-day service. I checked the time. Nearly 3 o'clock. Annoying. Most of my clothes needed cleaning. I had changed into swimming trunks and a loose linen shirt and headed to the main deck. I walked past an attendant varnishing one of the railings. Leaning against a different railing, I watched Miami shrink in the distance, the row of beach hotels disappearing in the haze. I took a deep breath of salt spray. Though the sun was hot, the ocean mist was cool. I wandered to the middle of the ship. The light blue pool was smaller than I expected. 2 men bumped a beach ball above their heads. I eyed their bodies. Toned, well-muscled, my type. They laughed and finally fell into the water, together, slick, tight bodies, V-tapered backs, six-packs, hair wild and shedding water, light glistening off their wet bodies. Yep, they are my type. The light reflected off the gold on their ring fingers. A kid, I'd guess about 10, yelled, "Cannonball!" and jumped into the pool near the 2 men. His splash drenched them. "Carrie!" one of the men yelled, his voice attempting to scold but broke into laughter. "It was an accident, Daddy Trevor." "Welcome to paradise," the second man said. He was English by the accent. Daddy Trevor rolled his eyes and said, "At least your mother isn't here, Daddy Darian." 2 husbands and their son. Might as well post a "Do Not Disturb" sign. Once again, bad luck had struck. It was the story of my life. Why are the good men always taken? Lounging on chairs nearby were a couple of men, about 60, silver hair, balding, and laughing as much as the men in the pool. They sipped something orange with umbrellas and chuckled at something on the phone. They also wore gold rings. Just my luck. I had accidentally booked a floating anniversary party. The universe must hate me. When I returned to my room, I passed another guy varnishing railings. They don't mention that in any travel brochures. At 4:30, I went exploring. The main thoroughfare was a split-level mall. Shops, cafes, bars, and near the elevators, a food court was in full swing. Pop music by Fiona Vale and Benson Boone played through hidden speakers. Some people in the crowd wore swimsuits, some wore casual shorts, and a couple of men wore business casual. There were not only male couples, but female ones, and a table held a throuple, I think. Every hand I scanned had a wedding ring. A female couple had matching ring tattoos instead of any jewelry. Lots of dad bods and old men and wedding rings. Alvin was in a nearby clothing store, chatting it up with an attendant. He held a bag heavy with something, probably clothes by the lumpy nature. The attendant was cute, nice athletic body, nice arms, fills out his clothes in a very particular way. He handed Alvin his phone. Alvin typed something into it and smiled while handing it back. So there are single people on this boat. I just have to look. I took the elevator up and entered a dark, sultry corner. The grotto, a bar on the second level, neon blue mood lights in the corners. It had a secret cave vibe. I walked up to the bartender. A neon, please, on the rocks. The bartender mixed citron vodka, blue curacao, lime juice, and a splash of pineapple juice in a shaker, added ice, and shook it. He poured the blue-green drink into a glass of ice and placed a thin slice of pineapple on the glass. Enjoy. He moved away before I could make conversation. A little early to start drinking. A man took the seat next to me. Name's Wade Walker. I work for Union Pacific. An angled nose with a bump near the bridge, eyes that scanned the room as if looking for an excuse, and cauliflower ears. He wasn't lithe and slim like the guys who'd been frolicking in the pool, but he was all square angles and muscles, not fat, but stocky, thick fingers, a neck that almost didn't exist. A small tuft of chest hair appeared near his open collar, his skin almost like leather. This man must work outside every day, all day. This wasn't a pretty boy, nor a trained Welsh corgi. Doubt this brute even went to college, not with hands that looked like they could crush cinder blocks. I'd be humiliated to be seen with this thug. Definitely not my type. God, I had to get rid of him before he scared off the quality men I actually wanted sitting next to me. I mumbled loud enough for him to hear. I'm waiting for someone, and you've taken his chair. Wade snickered. Nice to meet you, too. He wandered off, leaving me to scout the bar in silence. Good. An accomplished man has standards that other men must reach. Another man entered. Oh, he's too tall. Then a lesbian couple, the same ones with the tattooed ring. Then Alvin, carrying 2 shopping bags. He didn't see me, but landed everything on a table and sat down. Shopping must be hard work, Wade said, walking over to him. You want something to drink? Is that line fake? Why would anyone fall for a bruiser like Wade? I rolled my eyes. Alvin looked up from the bags, a little smile on his face, the light glinting off his copper highlights, and said, Water, cold, and enough ice to sink the ship. Make it a pitcher. He held the center of his black shirt and fluffed it to cool himself. Hate the heat? Wade asked. Not the heat, the humidity. Do they make deodorant strong enough for this? Bartender, Wade waved. Can we have a pitcher of water, heavy on the ice, for my friend Alvin? And you are? Wade Walker. I work for Union Pacific. Alvin eyed him up and down and then back up. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. I bet you do. I finished the drink and walked out. I was assigned the early dinner service. Felt like I was back in middle school. It was formal, so I wore my tuxedo and the diamond cufflinks my father had given me when I graduated college. Ironically, it was the same ones I had worn when the waiter in the Bahamas turned me down. Funny, I don't remember his name. The banquet hall was elegant, hanging geometrical chandeliers, mirrors on several walls, large windows showcasing the ocean views, and round tables surrounded by ergonomic chairs. White linens covered the tables, champagne flutes and formal place settings for 6 surrounded the edge of each table. A raised dais at the far end held a larger table. I assumed it was the captain's table. Most women wore formal wear, though some simply wore something nice. Most of the men wore suits, some wore tuxedos. The kids were dressed up as if they were heading to church. I found my seat at table 31. Turns out the guys I was ogling at the pool earlier were already there, Travis and Darian Wilkins, and their son Carrie. They were from some small town in Nevada called Dead Man's Butte. Never heard of it. Wade Walker eased in. He was from Milwaukee, and finally, an older woman sat down. Patricia Masters. She was an aide to some senator and was retiring this year. For dinner, I chose the broiled cold water lobster with butter sauce. The kid had the fish and chips. Well, he had the chips. His dad shared the fish and split a pasta bowl between them. Patricia had a stir-fried vegetable teriyaki with the side of grilled root vegetables. Wade had the 14-ounce bone-in New York strip steak with a balsamic pomegranate reduction. It wasn't on the menu. Across the hall, Alvin sat with a couple of guys taking pictures of their plates. One man appeared to be interviewing him. Must be gathering information for later. Probably ran his own podcast. Several people dined at the captain's table, including a man with blonde hair, blue eyes, and a bodyguard. His beige suit was obviously Dolce & Gabbana. He was groomed as if a professional had dressed him for a photo shoot. Styled hair, flawless skin, a jawline straight out of Hollywood. The man dripped money. The way his clothes fit testified to the quality of his personal trainer. Now there was a man who ticked off all my boxes. The captain left her seat to shake his hand. Now that's something you don't see every day. The back of the train stayed in the yard, Wade said, arranging silverware on the table end to end. And the front half? Patricia asked. He moved 2 knives as if they were a train, scooting them in front of me. Showed up in Detroit a day later, minus the engineer. I smiled politely. Doesn't the engineer run the train? Carrie, the kid, asked. You would think. Wade held up a glass of white wine. Now you see the mystery. Travis chuckled, glancing at his husband. I'm all for the supernatural, but seriously, who stopped the train? Wade dramatically sipped his wine before answering. 18-year-old kid who was there for a training ride-along. Control had to walk him through how to take it off autopilot and slow it down before he could pull the brakes. Kid did pretty good, though the train stopped about a half-mile too soon. Everybody walked away, Darian said. I'd call that a win. Except the engineer's pride, Wade quipped. Everybody chuckled. Wade nodded and sipped. Patricia smiled. Believe it or not, we had something similar happen, except with armored SUVs and an intern who hadn't even graduated. While she told her story, a waiter delivered our food, refilled our glasses, asked if anyone wanted anything, and left. Enya played softly in the background. The aromas of steak and pasta wafted through the dining hall, and I interrupted the conversation. How do you dine at the captain's table? Do you have to pay a fee? Patricia glanced around the table to see if anyone else would answer. When no one did, she said, It's by invitation. How Captain Sinclair chooses is up to her. It usually changes every night, but about a year ago, there was a firefighter injured on duty saving a dog. The senator I worked for made a couple of calls, and the man traveled aboard this very ship. He and his wife were invited to dine with the captain the final night. Kind of a reward for heroism. You know the captain? Carrie asked. Patricia smiled. Only by reputation. On day 2, I slept in until noon. Alvin had already left, but a new shopping bag was on his bed. We had no port of call, so I lounged on the deck, staring at the horizon. All day I watched for the man from the captain's table, but there was no sign of him anywhere on the ship. On day 3, we arrived at Nassau. Ironic, since I'd been here only days ago. However, the port was on a different part of the island than the Atlantis, where I'd stayed before. I went shopping with Alvin, visiting shops carrying everything from sandals to coconut wind chimes. After dinner, I went to Club Poseidon, one of 3 on-board nightclubs. It looked just like the ones back in Portland. Dark ceiling, lots of neon, and loud music with a hypnotic rhythm to gyrate to. It wasn't a gay club, but an everybody free-for-all. Anybody could dance with anyone. Preferences didn't matter, unless you were dancing with a partner with a wedding ring. It also had a full-service bar. I checked out the guys, older ones, younger ones, femboys, twinks, and bears. Lots of dad bods and bodybuilder wannabes. I couldn't find the guy from the captain's table, so I left and tried the other 2 nightclubs. He wasn't in any of them. I visited each bar, peeked into each restaurant, checked out the food court. He must have gone to bed. I went back to Club Poseidon. "Do you want to dance?" Wade asked, walking over to me. "Or are you waiting for someone?" "Something like that." The club smelled of alcohol and body spray. The lights strobed through different colors. The room held its breath. The guy from the captain's table walked in, multicolored lights glinting off his hair. The cream shirt absorbed the colors. He smiled at the woman next to him. A yellow light highlighted his face as he took her arm and led her onto the dance floor. She giggled. He stumbled. The woman steadied him. They laughed together. The bodyguard trailed them, surveying the crowd. An accomplished man has standards, and this stranger meets those standards. I walked away from Wade. "Somebody's stuck up," Wade replied. I glanced back. Wade walked into the dancers. Whatever, he didn't understand. I have standards. I smoothed my hair, dodged a waiter, and beelined toward the man. He and the woman held each other as they danced. She wore gold sequins that fragmented the light. He whispered in her ear. Now was my chance. I stepped between him and the bodyguard, tapped the man on the shoulder. As soon as his eyes met mine, I launched into my line. "I noticed how graceful a dancer you are. Perhaps you could indulge me with a dance?" Nobody could say no to that. It would be rude. I tried to make my conquering smirk sexy. He smelled divine, an expensive cologne. His eyes were even bluer up close, and his hair, so crisp and perfect he could slice cheese with it. She interrupted, clutching his arm. "I don't think so." I hate overprotective girlfriends. I bit my first response back and softly flirted. "A good-looking man like you? Shouldn't that be your decision?" He smiled, but it wasn't acceptance. "I'll have to decline." "You don't have to tell him about what happened," the woman whispered, her hand tightening around his arm. The music faded until it was only the 3 of us, a zone of quiet amidst the chaos. "I know," he replied. "I've just gotten out of the hospital. The guys in my unit put this trip together. It's our long-postponed honeymoon." "What do you mean?" "IED on a police action in Somalia." He raised his arm, revealing plastic fingers. "Barely survived. We married in the hospital a year ago. I'm cleared to travel, but I need to stay close to medical care. A cruise ship met every requirement." She took his good hand, beaming. "I proposed. He was in the hospital bed, on oxygen. They wheeled his bed into their chapel, and the priest came and married us." She loved me in spite of my injuries. His good arm randomly gestured at his abdomen. I didn't ask what he meant. Hell, she chuckled. He's the best-looking man on the outside, but even better on the inside. That's the man I fell in love with. Something slammed inside me. The perfect guy was as flawed as anyone else. His physique was a combination of military training and a year of physical therapy. A year in the hospital? Those weren't normal injuries. Burns? Shattered limbs? Severe internal damage requiring multiple surgeries? A combination of all of them? This is my husband's physical therapist. The woman pointed to the man I assumed was a bodyguard. Just because we're on vacation, my baby still has to do his exercises. Sorry to interrupt, I mumbled, and wandered to the bar. Day 4. We spent the night at sea only to wake up in Puerto Plata, Dominican Republic. The sky was cloudy, and dawn's light towered over the docks in Taino Bay. Alvin had convinced me to a day trip to fabled Damajagua, known for its 27 mystical waterfalls. I should have gone shopping. It was a 45-minute ride in an old bus that smelled of hot dogs and feet. But it did have air conditioning. Travis, Darian, and Carrie sat on the front. Me and Alvin sat in the back. Wade sat next to us. Awkward. I had snubbed him because I was in such a hurry to meet my perfect guy. Turned out the guy wasn't perfect, and he was taken. I fought a sudden melancholy. I stared out the window at the passing jungle and leaned my head against the glass. Had I been a jerk? The faint reflection of myself stared back, as if exasperated with me for not asking the right question. Most of the people on board were strangers, except the old married couple I'd seen lounging by the pool. One man was leaning against the others if asleep. What would it be like to trust someone so completely that you could live with them for decades? Without thinking about it, I got up out of my seat and walked toward theirs, holding tight to the seat backs to keep my balance. The silver-haired man nodded at me. Maybe it's none of my business, I asked, but how long have you been married? June 28th, 2016. We decided to wait to make sure there were no challenges to the Supreme Court ruling. How long have you been together? I asked. The man who had been snoozing smiled as he pretended to be asleep. 1985. We met at a Quiet Riot concert. You were singing the lyrics, the silver-haired man said. And lost my voice. And we still went for coffee the next day. Every time I hear, "Come on, feel the noise," I remember that night. I returned to my seat, seeing the green outside, but not seeing it. My hand held no jewelry, no ring, no promise. Life was a series of hookups. What had I missed? I glanced at Trevor and Darian. Their son was pointing at something outside the bus. I glanced at Alvin. He had moved seats and was talking with some guy with pink hair and heavy eyeshadow. What was I still missing? I had the watch, the clothes, the look, a restored Lamborghini back home, a condo that was paid for, a job at Waite and O'Brien Brokerage in Portland that paid very well. This trip was for fun, random hookups with barely any names exchanged, and maybe some time wasting money in local shops. Yet somehow, I felt hollow. The final seat squeaked under me. I tried to stretch out my legs, but there wasn't room. One question slid in and out of my thoughts. Why did life suddenly feel empty? Wade took a seat next to me. Good buddy of mine spent 30 years staring out the front window of an engine. The day his wife handed him divorce papers, he had that same look you're wearing now. Care to talk to somebody who you'll never see again? I was rude last night, I stuttered. Why are you talking to me? He chortled as if I were a bad comedian. You want rude? Work on the tracks and you'll hear what real rude sounds like, in 2 languages most days, and, depending on the crew, sometimes more. Your little attitude didn't even qualify as a whine. Hell, my dog is meaner than you. Doesn't dress as nice, but who cares about that? Ever have one of those moments where you need to talk, and if a friend isn't available, a stranger will do? We arrived at the 27 Falls, and instead of diving into one of the pools or frolicking in the waterfalls, we sat on the bank and watched the water drift past. For the rest of the day, we spoke. I told him about how empty I feel, especially when I looked at Trevor and his family, or the 2 old men lounging in one of the pools, even when I saw the ladies with the tattooed rings. Wade let me talk, and while we were riding back to the ship, he asked me to get a drink later, once we were aboard Don's Light. He wasn't the usual kind of man I dated, wasn't even close to the pretty boys in magazines. He was gruff, lived life loud, didn't care what other people thought. He had something my fantasy dates never had. He was real. I said yes to the drink. Day 5. Once again, we sailed through the night only to wake to a sunrise over a new island, the historic San Juan, Puerto Rico. The ship docked near the old San Juan, not far from the shipping district, while Carrie and his dads explored the ruined fort of Castillo San Cristobal. Alvin, Wade, and I went into the old city. Alvin wanted to try the mofongo. I wanted to find little souvenirs for my family, and Wade just wanted to wander. For lunch, we stopped by a diner, and I use that word loosely, for mofongo. A kid set down a mound of mashed plantains, topped with garlic shrimp for me, another topped with beef for Wade, and something that looked like it had escaped a horror movie for Alvin. It looked like someone had built a sandcastle out of potatoes and crowned it with seafood. "Octopus mofongo," Alvin said, already diving in. "It's a Puerto Rican thing." I poked mine suspiciously. Mofongo tasted like thick mashed potatoes with pork, though they layered the garlic pretty heavy. We each tried a taste of the others. The beef was spicy, the shrimp tender, and the octopus? A little chewy and a little spicy. Before we headed back to the ship, I purchased key fobs that read Puerto Rico for my relatives and a scarf for my sister. And that night, as we left Puerto Rico on the horizon and cell phones lost coverage, Alvin went dancing, while Wade and I walked the deck enjoying the quiet. We passed a deckhand varnishing the railing. "How many railings are there?" I asked. "It varies by ship to ship," he responded, "but the Don's Light has about 2.3 miles. "Why do you keep varnishing them?" He looked up long enough to stretch his back. "It doesn't take long before the salt and wind eat it away." Day 6. Don's Light eased along the Havenside Cruise Pier just after 9 in the morning. Beyond the terminal, green hills climbed into the clouds above Charlotte-Amalie, the largest city on St. Thomas and the capital of the U.S. Virgin Islands. The seas had roughened overnight to the point we could feel the deck sway. The sky had clouded over. A high wind blew them rapidly to the west. Once we were in range, my phone beeped with a lot of incoming notifications, including a text from the activities coordinator. "Voyage update. All beach excursions are canceled due to current weather conditions." By the time we disembarked, Charlotte-Amalie had already come to life. Ferries crossed the harbors, taxis swarmed the waterfront, and 3 other cruise ships were tied up along the piers. Alvin had met a guy, the one with pink hair, and the 2 of them wandered the winding streets looking for a place to eat. Wade and I joined the group heading to Blackbeard's castle. Only 3 stories tall, Blackbeard's castle sat atop a hill, giving it a remarkable view of Charlotte-Amalie Harbor. We climbed to the top, taking pictures of the harbor, of the ships, of the hills before descending into the city and joining Alvin for lunch. Alvin tried something called a callaloo. I wasn't that brave, neither was Wade. We shared a plate of meat-filled empanadas called pates, while washing it down with glasses of painkiller, a drink made from rum, coconut, pineapple, and orange juice. Day 7. The boat docked near Phillipsburg on the island of St. Martin, about 8 in the morning, our final stop before returning to Miami. The island is divided into 2 parts, the Dutch side and the French side. It's small enough that, given a few days, you could explore the entire thing. We had 10 hours. Wade and I met for breakfast at the Aquamarine before booking an excursion to the historic ruins of Fort Amsterdam. Built by the Dutch in 1631, the fort had watched over the harbor through centuries of wars, occupations, and changing flags. We followed the tour guide as we clambered around the weathered stone walls. "Did Blackbeard really come here?" I asked, "or is that just another tourist story?" The guide, an older gentleman with a brilliant smile, chuckled. "A little of both. St. Martin sat close to major Caribbean shipping routes, and pirates, privateers, merchants, navies, and smugglers all passed through these waters. Blackbeard's name gets attached to half the Caribbean, but men like him certainly sailed nearby." He swept an arm toward the harbor. Back then, every sail on the horizon could have meant trade, war, or trouble. Many of the same beaches and hills you see today were known to people whose names now fill history books. Dominic raised his hand. "Are there any original surviving buildings?" The tour guide thought a moment. St. Martin didn't just have to worry about pirates, but with hurricanes. I think every building has been rebuilt at least once or twice. Check out the old courthouse. It's been around since 1793. Alvin texted us to meet him at Dutch Blonde Beach Bar. A giant windmill rose above the restaurant, making it impossible to miss. Yellow umbrellas shaded the deck while the turquoise water of the Great Bay sparkled beyond the railing. A popular spot, even Captain Sinclair and several officers were there. We had burgers and a glass of the local liquor, guava berry, and then we headed to Maho Beach. We agreed to meet Alvin back on board. We sat on the beach, toes dug into the hot sand, and just stared at the dark turquoise water, the depth of the clouds above, and the row of cruise ships moored in port. The breeze was heavy with the tang of salt, the warmth of suntan lotion, and the scent of meat cooking in a nearby fire pit. I felt at ease. My shoulders relaxed, the muscles in my backs relaxed. I laid back, the sand warm beneath me, and stared at the sky. Wade lay beside me, propped up on an elbow. "You feeling better?" I looked at the dark clouds, at the way they moved and rubbed sand off my shirt. "I think I feel relaxed." Several kids screamed nearby, gleefully tossing an orange ball around. "I was wrong about you," Wade said, his voice lowering. "Very wrong." "How so?" Wade pushed the hair out of his eyes. "You're deeper than you let on." I rolled over, our faces only a foot apart. "Are you saying I'm shallow?" He smirked. "You said it, not me." Anger flared inside me. I let out a slow, measured breath, my jaw clenching. "Why did you think that?" Wade's smile became serious. "Why did you come on this trip?" he asked. I didn't want to say for the late-night extracurricular activities, even though it was the truth. That made me sound, well, shallow. Instead, I answered, "I needed to get away from Portland for a while." "Let me tell you a secret." Wade's smile returned, but not as powerful as I had seen before. "You would make a bad poker player. Your left eyebrow twitches when you lie." "Does not." He stared at me and asked again, Why did you come on this trip? I broke the gaze and sat up, my arms holding my knees. I stared out at the ocean and told the easier truth. I wanted a week of living like nothing mattered. Just like life back in college when it didn't matter who you slept with or what you did. I've never felt so free. My life feels like a series of rules and expectations. I'm so tired of it. Wade sat up, inching closer. What did you find when you got here? I didn't say anything. Didn't even know what I would say. Wade placed an arm around my shoulders. We sat there, unmoving, staring at the gray sky blending in with the slate gray ocean. A text arrived. Voyage update. Due to weather conditions, dawn's light will remain in St. Martin for an additional day. There will be no charge for the extended stay. However, alcoholic beverages, shore excursions, and other discretionary purchases will be billed as normal. Day 8. The sky cleared to a perfect blue, but the weather app still showed rough seas between here and Miami. Extra excursions opened up, including a snorkeling trip. We boarded a flat-bottomed boat with a dozen other passengers, including the old man I'd seen before. The guide was a petite local woman who spoke with a French accent. Île Tintamarre, she said, the noisy island, is sometimes called a turtle sanctuary, but there are a lot more species there than just turtles. Anybody live there? One of the men asked, shielding his eyes for a better view. It's about 3 kilometers north of St. Martin, and completely uninhabited, unless you count stingrays and turtles. The turquoise water stretched toward the horizon. Ahead, a small green island emerged from the sea. There were no hotels, no marina, and not even a restaurant. What it did have were white beaches, tropical vegetation, and countless birds. Île Tintamarre was smaller than I thought, maybe the length of 4 cruise ships lined up. It didn't have any hills, though one small part had a short ochre cliff. It's part of a protected nature reserve, the guide continued. Development is prohibited, so the wildlife can thrive undisturbed, especially leatherback and green turtles. We moored just offshore in water so clear it could have been glass. Because of the nearby storm, temperatures were perfect. Wearing life jackets and snorkel tubes, we drifted above the underwater parade. Fish swam in the shallows, their bodies every color I could imagine. Some were large, most were small. The sand on the bottom shifted. I held still, looking closer. Like a silent aircraft lifting from a runway, a stingray rose from the seabed and glided through the water with a grace I had never imagined. 3 sea turtles drifted below us, nibbling at patches of dark green seagrass. I'd seen photographs before, but the reality was breathtaking. Odd-shaped coral formations, water in shades of blue I had no name for, and a lone eel darted out of its crevice, grabbing something dark and pulling it back into its hole. Wade pointed. A lionfish swam by a fan-shaped coral, its fins lazily fluttering, its spines splayed in all their glory. We stayed in the water until our fingers wrinkled, and then we lunched on the deserted beach. The silence was so complete it made my ears ring. Distant birds cried, gulls wheeled overhead, and the waves gently lapped at our feet. No phones, no music, no talking, only blissful silence. The hot dogs had been cooked on a portable grill aboard the boat and still carried the smoky scent of charcoal. Sand clung to my damp calves no matter how often I brushed it away. The potato salad was cold against the afternoon heat, and the breeze carried the sharp tang of salt and sun-warmed seaweed from somewhere down the beach. Wade and I ate and talked about his years as an engineer and later working in the control tower, overseeing the Milwaukee freight yard. Between conversations, we simply sat together, watching the sunlight dance across the water. Every so often a wave rolled farther up the beach and washed over our feet before retreating back to the sea. About 3, the guide signaled it was time to leave. We cleaned up our corner of the beach and enjoyed the ocean breeze as we returned to dawn's light. I wish I could say when it happened, but sometime on the return trip, Wade placed an arm around my shoulders, and I snuggled into him. For the first time in months, maybe even years, I was happy. I leaned in a little closer to Wade, closing my eyes a moment to relish this rare sensation. That night, back at the ship, I had showered the seawater off and was dressing when Alvin barged in. "I need to ask you a huge favor, please." I pulled a t-shirt over my head, something I'd bought earlier today. It had St. Martin on the front with the silhouette of a palm tree across the middle. It did not go with my board shorts, but I wore it anyway. "If it's about money," I said, "I don't carry much." He grinned. "We don't need money on this ship." I sat on my bed and tried on my new sandals. My legs had tanned over the last week, but my nose hadn't. It was pink, probably going to peel. I should have bought sunscreen. "I met this guy," Alvin said, his smile going galactic. "Let me guess," I replied, seeing exactly where this was going. "You need some privacy tonight. Is it the one with pink hair?" At his over-enthusiastic nod, I grinned. "You owe me." "Anything." My diamond cufflinks glinted off the top shelf of the closet. An idea formed, one that made me nervous. I licked my lips, took a deep breath, and grabbed them both with my right hand and shoved them into my pocket. As I left, I walked toward one of the bars. My phone beeped. "Voyage update. Ship will leave St. Martin at 8. Be on board by 7:30. That gave me 3 hours. Perfect. I found Wade's cabin and knocked. He answered, shirtless, skin still damp and hair spiky from the shower. "Did you get the text?" I asked. "I did," he said. "Thinking of anything?" "Let's go into town, find something to eat. I want to ask you something." We wandered the streets closest to the marina, the towering bulk of the dawn's light remaining in view. We found a cantina where we ordered an order of mofongo and beef. "What did you want to talk about?" Wade's eyes held a glint as if he knew what I was about to say. I pulled the cufflinks from my pocket and set them on the table. "I've enjoyed myself this past week." "Me too," he replied. "I know you live in Milwaukee and I live in Portland." "But you want to know," he asked, "if this can continue?" "If you want," I said, afraid to look away, but too afraid to look at him. I think my eyes must have been begging because he leaned forward, eyes shining. "Why the cufflinks?" My idea began to sound silly, but I forged on anyway. "They're a set." He nodded, understanding. "And no matter how far apart they are, they're always a set." My cheeks warmed, and it suddenly became hard to breathe. Why did this feel like risk? Why did it feel like I could lose everything? This cruise wasn't supposed to be like this, only a week-long party where last names were optional. Wade leaned in and kissed me. "I could be wrong, but I think you like me." Day 1, a year later. I waited by the gangplank, eager for my first glance of Wade in far too long. The dawn's light towered behind us. It was a regular cruise, not an LGBTQ event, and we'd be going to different islands. But one of the stops included St. Martin. Wade and I were more than friends. Christmas had seen to that. I had a surprise I hadn't told him about yet. We seldom texted anymore, preferring actual conversations. We hadn't missed a night in 6 months. My surprise? I'd accepted a job in Milwaukee. It started the week after we got back from our trip. An Uber pulled up and Wade climbed out, his suitcase in one hand, a spray of roses in the other. Around his neck hung a silver chain. The diamond cufflink caught the sunlight, flashing like a tiny beacon. One look, and I grinned. I took off running. The end. Thank you, my friends. It has been a pleasure. I'm Gio, your writer and narrator, and Bentley is in charge of sound effects. The little guy is asleep right now. I'll see you next time. Peace, my friends. I love you all.